Okay. Next session is Dr. Laura Hammond. Laura is a reader in Investigative Psychology at Birmingham City University in the UK. She is also the director of the Crime and Society Research Centre there. Amongst other topics, she has conducted a lot of research on geographic profiling, using the where and when of offending to identify the who. She will tell us information we'll be able to use when prioritizing the suspects we need to look into. And I'm going to play Laura's session now.
Hi there, my name's Dr. Laura Hammond. I'm Director of the Crime and Society Research Centre at Birmingham City University. And in this session today, I'm going to be talking about how we can use criminal spatial behaviour to help inform investigative decision-making and various different operational strategies. This is somewhat of a whistle-stop tour, but I am going to provide a range of references as well as resources for further reading should you want to know more about any of the topics covered during the session. Crime location is one of the most consistent, reliable and objective elements of any form of criminal behaviour, and as such it has an awful lot to offer with regards to guiding investigative strategies and decision making. The locations in which crimes are committed are not random, but rather the result of a range of different decision-making processes on the part of the offender, and a range of research works have explored the different factors influencing where crimes occur. Like all of us, criminals are most comfortable operating in areas with which we're familiar, and so tend to stay relatively close to home or around key points or hubs of their normal daily activity. So work by Brantingham and Brantingham in 1981 mapped out the typical structure and patterning of offender spatial behaviour, showing that it related very closely to their non-criminal daily activities. The residence is typically a hub for offending, and offenders move out from this in order to commit their crimes, encountering opportunities and potential targets for offending as they move along the routeways between their hubs in their normal awareness space. They will, though, be subject to a range of decision processes governing where they decide to target. These will relate to the costs and efforts associated with accessing that target and potential risks involved, along with perceptions as to the potential gains and benefits of accessing that particular target. Because offenders tend to commit crimes within their normal daily activity spaces, often crimes are committed in locations that are relatively close to the offender's home. In this table here, we see the average distances for a range of different crime types for offences committed in a borough of London. And what we see is that, generally speaking, most offences were committed within 2 kilometres of the offender's home. The average for all crimes was just slightly over 2 kilometres. But what we also see is that it does vary extensively for different types of crime. Those that are property offences, which tend to involve a higher degree of targeting, more planned considerations, tend to occur slightly further away from home as a result of these rational choice considerations that I referred to. And those that are committed against the person, so things like assault, indecent assault, ABH, tend to occur much closer to home, often because they're spontaneous, opportunistic offences that occur within the normal daily activity space. If we plot the frequency and likelihood of offending relative to distance from home, what we see is a substantial decrease in offending rates as distance from the home increases, and this is referred to as distance decay. Whilst the nature and form of this decay does vary by crime type, and in the example here we can see that property offences tend to be committed at proportionally greater distances at higher frequencies than crimes committed against the person. But we do see this pattern of decreasing in offending rates with increased distance from the home across crime types, and this has been observed for samples of offenders from around the world. We also know from research into the spatial patterning of crime that serial offenders tend to commit their crimes centered around their home, that the home provides an anchoring point or base for their criminal activity. Cantor and Larkin found that the majority of offenders committed their crimes within the area in which they lived. And they showed that if you drew a circle, the diameter of which was the distance between the two furthermost crimes in a series, that in 87% of cases, the offender lived within that circle, so within the area circumscribed by their crimes. Stuart Kind applied navigational methods to the case of the Yorkshire Ripper and showed that the centre of gravity, so the point that is simultaneously the minimum possible distance from all of the crimes in a series, could provide a useful means of predicting the home location of the perpetrator of those offences. And subsequent work by Cantor and Gregory and others has shown the offenders live in close proximity to the centre of gravity of their crimes. So the practice of using these patterns to inform such operational activities is typically referred to as geographical or geographic profiling. There are a number of different methods and computerized systems that can be used for making geographical profiling predictions. These use the decay functions to characterize the distance patterns for different criminal cohorts, apply these to each of the crimes in a series, and then combine the different levels of probability allocated to all of the different regions around the crimes in order to identify a central high priority hub of the offending pattern. And what you get is an output that indicates a high probability or high priority area of the offence distribution where investigative strategies and resources should be initially targeted. Geographical profiling predictions, though, can also be made using much simpler methods. There has been a range of research that has shown that offenders tend to live relatively close to the centre of the circle comprising their offence distribution, and in a number of cases it's proven a very accurate means of predicting likely offender base locations and providing a means of prioritising amongst offenders. A piece of research we did a while back now looked at where the actual perpetrators of offence series featured in ranked prioritizations of all known offenders operating within an area, and offenders were ranked on the basis of different geographical features of the offence pattern. So they were ranked, for example, on the basis of how close they lived to the centre of the circle, to the centre of gravity of the distribution, to the first offence in a series, to the last offence in a series, or on the basis of the high probability, high priority area identified using different functions within a geographical profiling system. And what we found was that in the majority of cases, sometimes as many as 70 or 80%, offenders lived within the top 20 of all ranked offenders, which totaled in the hundreds, operating and known to operate in those areas. And in this table, we can see the percentage of cases in which the actual offender ranked in the top 5% of the prioritised rankings of offenders. Danielle provides an example of geographic profiling in practice with regards to an investigation into 7 sexual assaults committed in Bath in 2005. What they did is conducted a geographical profiling analysis and used this to target in on the patterning of the victim's movements prior to the assaults occurring. On the basis of the geographical profile, they implemented a decoy operation around the centre part of the city where the victims had all been active prior to the assaults occurring, and as a result of this activity, they subsequently arrested and charged the offenders. The spatial patterning of crime has also been found to be very effective as a means of linking crimes to a common offender. So in one study looking at the degree of accuracy to which linked and unlinked crime pairs could be matched, it was found that the geographical elements of the offences, so the intercrime distances, provide much better discrimination accuracy and were much better at discriminating linked and unlinked pairs than behavioural elements of the offences or temporal proximity of the crimes. Patterning of crime can be used to target resource distribution, and this approach relies on the analysis of spatial patterns and trends in crime occurrence. O'Neill provides an example of how resource allocation could be tailored and targeted depending on levels and distribution of crime in different geographical regions of a city. And they found that different police responses could be allocated more effectively, ensuring that the right people were in the right numbers, in the right places, addressing the right issues and concerns if geographical clustering of offences was considered. Bullen provides an example of how the geography of crime can be used to develop partnership approaches. By identifying vulnerable localities with high levels of drug use and drug-using offenders, as well as high areas of acquisitive crime in neighbouring parts of the city, they were able to introduce specific multi-agency interventions that directly impacted on crime rates, reducing burglary and vehicle theft across the area. Those are just a few examples of the way in which spatial patterns in crime and spatial behaviour can inform investigative strategies and decision-making. If you'd like to know a bit more, you may find the following resources useful. Thank you for listening.
So that was Dr. Laura Hammond from Birmingham City University on geographic profiling. If there are any questions about this particular session, please put it in the comments now. I have an interest in geographic profiling. I did my MSc thesis on it, and I find the topic very fascinating because it is so useful in narrowing down where to search for an offender and where you start investigating when you've got a lot of suspects. So my notes from this session, crime location is the most consistent, reliable, objective element of criminal behavior. So I know that offender profiling has had a lot of fascination in the media and in the public because it almost seems like magic. But actually geographic profiling or spatial analysis, or the analysis of spatial criminal behavior, is a lot more reliable and is objective and can be assessed with data and can be used in investigations very well. Offenders tend to offend within their normal daily activity spaces that is close to home. Now, Dr. Hammond mentioned that she showed us a table there of the average distances traveled to specific crimes. You need to keep in mind that, I think for rapists it's less, something like 1.6 kilometers that they travel in order to commit a rape. You need to keep in mind, though, that doesn't apply to every country, because the geography, the topography, what the area looks like varies from country to country. So there was some research in New Zealand, for example, where offenders travel much further distances to offend. So this 1.6 kilometers would not apply to them. So most of the geographic profiling research has been done in the UK and America. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these distance statistics. For acquisitive crimes, offenders will actually travel further from home because they have to go to a static location to steal from that location, whereas violence can usually happen closer to the home because it can be started or triggered or initiated spontaneously with moving victims. Violence is against victims, against people who move around, and the offender doesn't have as much control over where they encounter those victims as they would over something static that they want to steal from. Not only crime locations, but also encounter sites can be used for geographic profiling. Now, Laura mentioned that crime in Bath. So that was a crime where women were raped, on Saturday, Friday nights. And how they actually did the geographic profiling was really smart. So they did very detailed statements with the victims, and they plotted the paths from where they had walked from the town center to their home. And they could then identify those common places where all those victims had been and where the offender was probably, hanging around, lying in wait to spot a victim walking on her own, to then follow her. So he wasn't attacking her there, it was the encounter site. He was then following her. And when he felt safe to attack her, he did that. So it was plotting the whole routes that they had taken from the town center. And the distance between crimes and series is a more reliable linkage factor than time or behavior, because time or behavior can also be dependent on others. We have a question. Mirko Fernandez. Is it possible to identify geographic areas with higher levels of vulnerability to online sexual exploitation targeting based on bandwidth access? That I don't know. I have to admit, Mirko, I don't know much about online sexual abuse. I think the dark web is something that is a completely different area, but it's a growing area, and I haven't got much experience in that. So unfortunately, I can't answer that. Apologies. And I'm not going to waffle around it. I don't know. Do we have any other questions about this? I'm not going to try and pronounce this name because I like it when people practice my name and know how to pronounce it properly, and I don't want to mess it up. I should know, perhaps. Will you share this conference on the YouTube page? Can I watch it later? Yes, you can. It will stay on YouTube. It will stay on the Twitter feeds, on the Facebook feeds, and it will also be as a whole thing, as a whole event on the website. And also I'll extract the single sessions from it with the introduction and with the discussion so that you can rewatch a video that you're particularly interested in. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do next is I want to thank our first sponsor. So the IACA, the International Association of Crime Analysts, they actually provided a short video that we're going to play for you now. Or we're not. Perhaps hang on, let me do that.
The International Association of Crime Analysts is actively committed to serving crime and intelligence analysts all over the world. With over 4,000 members from 67 countries, we are actively expanding our membership and developing our services. Our certification program sets a high standard for analysts globally. The Law Enforcement Analysts Foundation, or LEAF, and the Certified Law Enforcement Analysts Program, CLEAR, provide accreditation for both entry-level and experienced analysts. We also facilitate coaching and mentoring for our members. The IACA's professional training series provides analysts with all the skills they need, offering classes online and in person in tactical analysis, problem analysis, computer applications, crime mapping, and much more. In addition, our annual conferences and symposiums provide unique professional development and networking opportunities. We'd be delighted if you could join us for our conference this year, which will be held in Las Vegas, Nevada between the 23rd and 27th of August. Registration is open now.
Right, so let me just read something for you about the IACA. The International Association for Crime Analysts, or IACA, is an entirely volunteer-run association actively committed to serving crime and intelligence analysts all over the world. The IACA want all analysts to be able to achieve their maximum potential so that, as analysts, we can ultimately help inform more effective police interventions and improve public safety. The association currently has approximately 4,000 members from 67 countries and are actively expanding. IACA believe that whatever stage analysts are at within their career, they all have something to learn and they all have something to share. So IACA provide a wide range of services which enable both skills development and networking. Whether it's through conferences or international symposiums, training courses, webinars, certification programs, publications, mentoring program, member directory or online forum, members are able to connect with and learn from others on a continuous basis. If anyone is interested in becoming a member of this outstanding community, you can register or find out more from our website, iaca.net. Okay, so I'm actually a member of the IACA. At least 2 of the talks here today are very relevant to, 3 are very relevant to analysts. The one on spatial behavior that we've already seen, there's going to be one on crime linkage and one directly on crime analysis. So the analysts are the decision-making centers of police forces. So very, very important to policing. Okay, do we have any questions before I